welcome to our deep dive into the Marvel's limited comic book series.
Oh, Marvels.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we're going to be pulling from excerpts of Marvel Comics: The Untold Story.
Okay.
And also a Stanford University summary of Marvels itself.
Sounds good.
And yeah, we're going to be exploring its creation and impact.
Okay.
And get ready because we're going to see Marvel history
Okay.
through the eyes of just an average guy,
All right.
a photographer named Phil Sheldon.
Cool.
And plus, we'll uncover the drama behind the scenes.
Ooh.
Creator clashes, industry shakeups, even a little corporate espionage.
I love it.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating to me is the timing of it all.
Yeah.
Because Marvels is this beautiful, almost nostalgic look at these classic Marvel heroes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it came out like right when the actual company behind it was kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
Almost ironic.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack how Marvel's even came to be.
Okay.
It actually started as a showcase for this amazing artist, Alex Ross. But it evolved into something much bigger.
Right.
You're right. Ross was already known for his super realistic style.
Uh-huh.
And he wanted to portray these iconic Marvel heroes in a whole new way.
Right.
But then someone had the idea to tell the story from the perspective of Phil Sheldon,
Yeah.
this everyday photographer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that human element is what makes Marvel so unique.
I think so.
Yeah, it really was a huge gamble, though, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a 4-issue limited series,
Yeah.
a higher price point than usual.
Right.
And then Kurt Busiek as the writer.
Yeah.
He was relatively unknown then.
Yeah.
And then plus an artist who was pretty new to the scene.
Mm-hmm.
This sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It does. And the book even mentions that their editor was practically begging them to include Wolverine.
Really?
Just for sales purposes.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Apparently they were originally going with an elderly man with one eye and no superpowers as the main character.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm glad they stuck to their guns.
Me too. Me too.
Because Marvel's was a smash hit,
It was.
proving that sometimes you have to break the mold to really connect with people.
Right.
But
Yeah.
if Marvel's was such a success,
Yeah.
why was the company itself in such bad shape?
Well, that's where the behind-the-scenes story gets really interesting.
Yeah.
You have to remember, the early 90s were a wild time for the comic book industry.
Yeah.
Marvel was trying to navigate a changing market, and let's just say they made some questionable decisions.
Like their acquisition of Malibu Comics.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there was that whole Marvolution thing.
Oh, Marvolution.
Basically, they tried to completely overhaul their comics,
Yeah.
but it totally backfired.
It did.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this amazing anecdote in Marvel Comics: The Untold Story about a staff dinner
Okay.
where they announce Marvolution.
Mm-hmm.
And these two veteran employees just look at each other and say, we're screwed.
Oh, no.
I know.
That's rough.
Can you imagine being at that dinner?
I can only imagine.
The tension must have been so thick you could cut it with a knife.
Seriously.
Seriously.
Okay.
But it sounds like there was a real disconnect between the people at the top
Yeah.
and those who had been with Marvel for years.
Right.
The ones who understood what made the company special.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a massive power shift happening within Marvel.
Yeah.
Sales and marketing were calling the shots.
Right.
And editorial was being pushed aside.
Not good.
I know. And you can imagine this had a huge impact on the creators.
Definitely.
Which brings us to the heart of Marvel's.
Okay.
Phil Sheldon experiencing these huge events alongside the heroes.
Right.
It's like we get to witness the birth of the Marvel Universe through someone just like us.
Exactly. Imagine seeing Captain America on newsreels.
Yeah.
Not just as a comic book character, but as a symbol of hope during wartime.
Yeah.
Or think about the awe and maybe even fear of witnessing the Fantastic Four's debut.
Right.
Or the emergence of the X-Men for Sheldon.
Yeah.
These aren't just stories in a comic book. They're shaping his world.
Yeah. And that's what makes Marvel so relatable.
I think so.
It forces us to ask ourselves, how would we react if these unbelievable, sometimes terrifying things were happening all around us?
It's true.
It makes the fantastical feel real, and I think that's why it resonated with so many readers.
Totally. And, you know, Busiek and Ross intentionally left out real-world historical events.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they focus solely on the impact of superheroes on society.
Okay.
It's like they're asking, what if these fictional events were our actual history?
It's a brilliant way to examine the power of these characters and their stories. Would you say?
Definitely.
And speaking of power, we can't forget the visuals
Oh, yeah.
that brought this world to life.
Right.
Alex Ross's art is just incredible.
The art is amazing.
It's so unique. His style is photorealistic,
Yeah.
using gouache and watercolor to create this depth
Yeah.
that you rarely see in comics.
Right.
It's almost like these heroes are jumping right off the page.
Yeah, they feel so real.
They do.
Yeah.
And the way he uses perspective is masterful.
Mm-hmm.
He often draws the heroes from below,
Oh, yeah.
making them seem truly larger than life.
Right.
It emphasizes their grandeur and power in a way that's just breathtaking.
Absolutely.
And the detail he puts into each character design is amazing. Their costumes, their poses, even their expressions, it all reflects their personalities and backstories.
Oh,
You can tell Ross really did his research
Yeah.
and immersed himself in the history of these characters.
For sure.
It's no wonder that Marvel Comics' The Untold Story highlights Ross's influence on comic book art.
Right.
He didn't just draw these characters, he reimagined them
Yeah.
in a way that was both familiar and awe-inspiring. It makes sense that his art has become so iconic.
Makes sense.
But while Marvel's was celebrating all these things behind the scenes at Marvel, we're getting pretty messy.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets good.
Yeah, remember Marvel's came out during a time when Marvel Comics was really struggling financially. And Marvel Comics' The Untold Story paints a pretty grim picture of what was happening.
Oh, it wasn't pretty.
They were on a buying spree, gobbling up companies like Malibu Comics, and they had this Marvolution strategy that was supposed to revolutionize the industry,
Yeah.
but ended up alienating a lot of people.
It was a rough time.
The book talks about how Marvel was facing this huge debt,
Oh, yeah.
and they were making some really desperate moves.
Uh-huh.
They even bought another trading card company, Skybox,
What?
even though the trading card market was collapsing.
Oh, wow.
So you have this stunning visual masterpiece in Marvel, celebrate the history of Marvel,
Right.
and yet behind the scenes, Marvel itself was anything but a masterpiece.
Ooh, that's rough.
So what happened next?
Well, that's the story for part 2.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
We'll be right back.
Can't wait. Yeah, it really highlights the contrast, doesn't it?
Right.
Marvel's is capturing the sense of wonder and optimism about the early days of Marvel, while the company itself is teetering on the brink of collapse.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
You would almost think the people making Marvels had no idea what was going on in the actual offices.
Right, it's like this huge disconnect.
Yeah.
Here's this beautiful tribute to Marvel's history.
Uh-huh.
But behind the scenes, you have these decisions that seem to be dismantling everything those classic stories stood for.
Yeah, and Marvel Comics' The Untold Story really lays it all out there.
Yeah.
Like, their exclusive distribution deal with Heroes World was a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
Retailers had to pick sides, and it ended up hurting the entire industry.
Yeah, it makes sense that comic book shops were closing left and right.
Yeah, the smaller distributors just couldn't compete.
And on top of that, Marvel was still spending like crazy.
Yeah, they bought Skybox, a trading card company, even though the trading card market was imploding.
So they were trying to create a monopoly.
Yeah, it just seemed like panic, not strategy.
But it backfired spectacularly.
Big time.
It's like they were grasping at straws, trying anything to stay afloat.
Yeah.
But all this chaos had to be taking a toll on the people who actually made the comics.
Oh, absolutely.
The writers, the artists, the editors. They must have been feeling the pressure.
The book describes this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty at Marvel.
Oh, gosh.
Layoffs canceled titles.
Yeah.
It felt like the company was losing its soul.
And there's this really sad story about Herb Trimpe.
Yeah.
A longtime Hulk artist.
Right.
He'd been with Marvel since the 60s.
Yeah.
But suddenly he was struggling to get work.
Really?
Even thinking about going back to college at 56 years old.
Oh, wow.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, he wrote in his journal, "The place is a shambles. Sales are down. Morale is down. Everyone's talking about more layoffs coming."
Imagine dedicating your life to a company,
Right?
only to be tossed aside when things get tough.
That's awful.
And it wasn't just Trimpe.
Yeah.
Other Marvel veterans, people like Maurice Severin and John Romita Sr.,
Right.
they helped build Marvel.
Yeah.
And they were being squeezed out too.
Yeah. It's a dark time.
And it's interesting because this feeling of disillusionment is actually mirrored in the ending of Marvel's.
Oh, really?
Phil Sheldon, our everyman narrator, ends up giving up photography.
Wow.
He's just worn down by the increasingly cynical world of superheroes.
It's almost like a metaphor for what was happening at Marvel itself.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
The optimism of those early days was gone, both in the real world and in Marvel's.
Things were definitely getting darker and more complicated.
But then Marvel made this crazy decision,
What was that?
bringing in Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld
Oh, yeah.
to revamp some of their biggest characters.
Right.
Those guys had left Marvel to start Image Comics, remember?
Adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
A lot of fans and creators saw it as a betrayal.
Right.
It felt like Marvel was outsourcing its legacy to the very people who had walked away from it.
The Heroes Reborn initiative was definitely controversial.
It was.
I remember people being really torn about it.
Yeah.
On the one hand, it created a buzz and some new readers came in, but a lot of longtime fans felt like these new versions of the characters were just cheap knockoffs.
And it created this strange situation where the original versions of these characters, the ones everyone knew and loved, were basically erased.
That's messed up. Like they never existed.
Was it all just a cash grab?
It was a huge gamble.
Yeah.
And it didn't really pay off.
Really?
The Heroes Reborn books didn't sell as well as they hoped.
Okay.
And the whole thing just felt desperate.
It's like they were trying to recapture the magic they'd had with Image Comics back in the early 90s.
Yeah, but they forgot that Image's success was all about creative freedom.
Right.
Artists like Lee and Liefeld had total control.
Exactly. By trying to control and commodify that same energy, Marvel totally missed the point.
Yeah.
And the irony is,
What?
Marvel's this beautiful book celebrating the past comes out right when the company is desperately trying to erase that past.
That's crazy.
If Marvel's was so successful, why didn't someone at Marvel stop and say, hey, maybe we're doing something wrong? Well, according to Marvel Comics, The Untold Story, there was one person who was sort of removed from all the chaos, Stan Lee.
Oh, Stanley.
He was off doing his own thing, focused on being this celebrity ambassador for Marvel.
He'd moved on to a different phase of his career.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if he felt any sadness watching the company he built fall apart.
It's definitely a reminder that even legends like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby aren't immune to the ups and downs of the industry.
Yeah.
Their work continues to be reinterpreted and reimagined sometimes in ways they might not have liked.
I guess that's the nature of these characters.
Right.
They're bigger than any one creator.
Yeah.
Even bigger than the company itself.
Right.
They become part of our culture,
Yeah.
and their stories just keep evolving.
It's pretty amazing.
It is. But back at the chaos,
Okay.
Marvel is in a tailspin.
Right.
How do they even survive all this?
That is the question, isn't it?
They were on the verge of collapse,
Yeah.
but somehow they turned it around and became this multimedia giant.
We'll have to save that story for another deep dive.
Okay.
But first, we need to talk about the fallout from Heroes Reborn
Okay.
and how it changed the Marvel Universe.
So Marvel's making these huge decisions, right? Shaking up the whole industry.
Yeah.
But what about the people actually making the comics?
Yeah.
How do they handle all this chaos?
Well, Marvel Comics, The Untold Story, paints a pretty rough picture.
Yeah.
The editorial staff was drowning in work.
Really?
Like, their colleagues are getting laid off, but they're stuck with these, like, massive workloads.
Wow.
And the freelancers forget it.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
caught between, like, what the editors want and whatever crazy idea marketing is pushing that week.
So it sounds like a nightmare.
Pretty much.
Didn't Fabian Nicieza,
Yeah.
the guy who was writing a lot of the X-Men stuff, end up quitting?
He said publicly that the money just wasn't worth it anymore.
Oh, wow.
He called it a lack of creative satisfaction and perpetuation of mediocrity.
That's harsh.
Ouch.
But you can't blame him. If you're not passionate about the work, what's the point?
Exactly.
And it wasn't just him.
Right.
Even Scott Lobdell, who was a huge name at the time,
Yeah.
he was frustrated.
He felt like creativity was being stifled.
Really?
Too much micromanaging, too much second guessing.
Yeah.
That spark that made Marvel so special was fading.
And then there's the Clone Saga over in the Spider-Man comics.
Oh, don't even get me started on that.
It was a total mess.
Oh, it was a mess.
What was supposed to be a fresh start for Spider-Man just turned into this convoluted storyline that went on forever.
Yeah, you can see the sales and marketing department's fingerprints all over that one.
Yeah.
They kept pushing for more tie-ins, more events, more everything.
Right.
It didn't matter if the story made sense anymore.
It's like they were addicted to short-term profits.
Pretty much.
And they didn't care if it ruined the characters
Yeah.
or alienated the fans.
Right.
And the creators were just stuck in the middle,
Yeah.
forced to make compromises that they probably hated.
There's even a part in the book where the writers and editors of the Spider-Man books are literally arguing over who has to write Mary Jane having a miscarriage.
Oh my gosh, that is dark.
It was bad.
They were milking these characters for every drop of drama, even if it meant destroying them.
And remember, all this is happening while the comic book market itself is shrinking.
Right.
The speculator bubble had burst, and comic book stores were barely hanging on.
So it's like the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Terrible decisions at the top,
Yeah.
turmoil within the company,
Right.
and the whole market is drying up.
It's amazing Marvel even survived.
It is, but they did.
They did, and one of the guys who helped turn things around was Bob Harris.
Oh, yeah, Bob Harris.
Remember, he was one of the 5 editors-in-chief they appointed during that whole Marvolution mess?
Right.
Well, he ended up being promoted to the sole editor-in-chief.
Okay.
And he was tasked with saving the company.
So what did he do?
Well, he didn't really have some secret formula. He just understood that they needed to go back to basics.
All right.
Focus on good stories, stories that respected the characters and connected with readers.
Mm-hmm.
No more gimmicks, no more cash grabs.
But it sounds like he knew that to win back the fans, they had to win back the trust of the creators first.
Exactly. And he streamlined the whole editorial process.
Okay.
Cutting out layers of bureaucracy and giving the creators more freedom.
Yeah.
You know, he knew that's where the magic comes from.
So basically he had to clean up the mess that Marvolution created.
Pretty much.
Wow.
And it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
There were more layoffs, more tough choices.
Right.
But little by little, things started to improve.
Oh.
The comics got better, and Marvel started to rebuild its reputation.
It's like that saying, sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can climb back up.
Yeah.
It's inspiring in a way.
It is.
Even when things seem hopeless,
Yeah.
there's always a chance for a comeback.
And in Marvel's case, that comeback started with remembering what really mattered.
Yeah.
The stories, the characters, the people who create them.
Yeah.
That's the heart of it all.
And like we saw with Marvel's,
Right.
those stories can be incredibly powerful.
They can.
They can lift us up, inspire us, even when the world around us feels like it's falling apart. It's a reminder that we always need heroes both in fiction and in real life.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive into Marvels.
We
looked at the comic itself,
Yep.
the crazy time it was created in,
Right.
the impact it had on the industry.
It's a fascinating story.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we'd love for you to continue exploring these ideas. If Marvel sounds interesting, definitely check it out.
Please do.
And I highly recommend Marvel Comics: The Untold Story for a deeper look behind the curtain.
It's a great read.
It really is.
And, you know, it's all about asking questions and digging deeper.
Yeah.
Like, how has the comic book industry changed since then?
Right.
What lessons did we learn? What challenges are still out there? The more we understand the past, the better we can shape the future.
So true. Keep diving, everyone.